Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Gaming here, back to the video. Today's episode, we're going to take a look at the top 5 melee DPS for Season 3 of The War Within. This is solely based off of the overall Raider.io scores and what is the meta at the moment. So that is what we're going to focus on this specific video, is what is performing the best. And we're going to stick specifically to a melee DPS. So number 1 on our list is going to be Frost DK. So Frost DK is currently the strongest melee DPS spec, and it is the strongest DPS spec in the game. So Frost DK has a pretty good balance between both AoE damage, priority target damage, and survivability. And while it doesn't bring some of that flashy utility that a lot of other specs can offer, it's very consistent and it's very durable. Probably the biggest strength of Frost DK is that it can maintain both high AoE damage and strong single target damage at the same time. And in Mythic Plus, that's incredibly valuable, because of course large packs of enemies are common, but also bosses and priority mobs must still be taken down efficiently. And Frost DK handles both of those roles very well. They also have pretty much unmatched survivability. There are some other specs in this list that will be pretty similar to them, but they're extremely tough to kill. And it's one of the major reasons that they excel in high keys. So they have spells like their Icebound Fortitude, they have their Death Strike, Anti-Magic Shell, and Anti-Magic Zone, as well as Null Magic and Permafrost. Just give them a lot of mitigation. They also have pretty decent utility and some unique utility that no other classes bring, such as our Death Grip. Right, that's going to allow us to reposition enemies. We have our Blinding Sleep for an AoE stop. We have our Mind Freeze on a 15-second cooldown, and of course our Chains of Ice. Now, with a strong spec like this, it does not come without its limitations. So kind of like we said earlier, the utility is a little bit narrower than most of the other specs. It lacks dispels, it lacks skips, it lacks large AoE stuns. However, it's just straight up consistent. It has good survivability, consistent AoE, consistent single target damage. And that's really good in high keys, where staying alive is just as important as dishing out the damage. So why is Frost DK strong right now? Number 1, they're versatile, can handle both AoE and single target damage. They're durable, they have an exceptional defensive toolkit. They're also control oriented, so they have all sorts of interrupts, slows, and are able to reposition mobs. And number 4, they're just reliable. Frost DKs are less prone to downtime. They don't require any sort of like fancy setups or anything like that, just making them a safe, consistent pick. Up next on our list is going to be the Havoc Demon Hunter. So Havoc Demon Hunter is going to have a combination of explosive single target damage and strong AoE burst. And it also has some unique group utility that makes it one of the most attractive melee DPS options at the moment. And while certain dungeon layouts can challenge melee specs, Havoc still remains a highly impactful choice. So where Havoc Demon Hunter really excels is channeling damage through a high priority target. This is going to give you the ability to maximize damage across multiple enemies all at the same time, giving Havoc a unique edge in Mythic Plus. So the synergy between its funnel damage as well as its Chaos brand, which is going to increase the magical damage dealt by the entire group, just further overall amplifies your party's DPS. So Havoc's role is a priority-focused powerhouse, essentially. Now, Havoc also has pretty high AoE burst potential, which is really good for those dense trash pools. It's going to allow your DPS to scale with the size of the pack. Now, Havoc Demon Hunter is also naturally durable, very similar to the Frost DK that we just talked about. And a lot of this is due to their self-healing through their leech and just their passive magic damage reduction. Now, in terms of the utility, we already talked about the Chaos brand that they have. So you're going to be really strong with magic compositions. We also have our Imprison, which is great for selective mob skipping and helping you avoid those specific packs that just take a long time to kill. They have their Darkness, which is going to temporarily shield the group from high damage. And they also have a lot of AoE and single target stops. Now, for Havoc Demon Hunter's limitations, they of course have some weaknesses. So their pure single target damage is quite a bit less impressive than Frost DK's, and the spec is relatively susceptible to physical damage. And their utility is also pretty situational, especially things like their Imprison. They're just not used in every single dungeon. Overall, though, even despite those limitations, their overall damage output is really good. They have good funneling capability through their Wounded Quarry. They have strong self-healing and passive defensives, and pretty decent group utility through their Chaos brand. Up next on our list, we have Fury Warriors. So Fury Warrior continues to be one of the strongest generalist melee DPS specs in Mythic Plus. And while it's not always seen in those top tier meta groups pushing the absolute highest keys, Fury has proven that it's both reliable and durable. So Fury Warrior is going to fall in a similar spot to like our Frost DK. They're able to maintain consistent AoE and single target damage without compromising the other. So through its rotational design with talents like Improved Whirlwind, Fury can cleave freely while maintaining strong single target damage output, and this allows Fury to do well in every single part of the dungeon. Another thing that complements this is most of their major cooldowns deal both single target and multi-target damage, meaning that your big cooldown windows are going to hit everything equally as hard. And it's just great from small packs to massive AoE pools. Now, very similar to both Frost DK and Havoc Demon Hunter, they have pretty good sustain as well. They have innate damage reduction, constant self-healing through their Bloodthirst, and active defensives like their Enraged Generation and their Spell Reflection. So yet again, just another DPS spec that does not require as much babysitting. Now, one thing that Fury does lack is its Mythic Plus utility. Most of its utility is going to be pretty practical, so they will bring that Battle Shout, so that 5% attack power buff for all melee and hunters, so a group-wide DPS increase that's always going to be welcome. We have your kicks with Pummel, you have your Spell Reflection, you have your Stormbolt and Shockwave for your stun, Piercing Howl and Crackling Thunder for slows and kiting, and then a Rallying Cry, a group-wide HP buffer. So unfortunately, none of these abilities are great. I do really think that Blizzard should give warriors at least a battle res. I think it would probably fit their class fantasy as well. Almost like a second wind sort of talent, or maybe at least a self-resurrection would be nice. But overall, that's why Fury Warrior is in the place that they're in. They are very durable, very tanky, and they have just a good damage profile overall. They're going to struggle against spread out targets due to their melee cleave range. Their damage outside of cooldowns can feel a little bit weaker as well, and they're also very downtime dependent. You need to stick to your target to make them work. Up next on our list is going to be the Sub Rogue. So Sub Rogue is surprisingly competitive in Mythic Plus, even if it does remain a bit unconventional compared to a lot of the other popular melee specs, with its new tier set bonus boosting its burst damage, a slight improvement to its AoE output, and just naturally strong single target performance. Sub has the tools to thrive in Season 3. So starting out, they have a ton of burst damage. It's one of their main strengths, and its rotation is going to center around coordinated cooldown windows. So their burst profile actually synergizes really well with something like an Augmentation Evoker, whose buffs amplify Sub Rogue's cooldown windows even further. So almost like the Fire Mage of melee specs. And when Sub Rogue and Augmentation Evoker are combined, you will see some of the highest spike damage scenarios in Mythic Plus. So another thing that's really good about bringing a Sub Rogue is their strong single target performance. So that means naturally they're going to be very good for bossing, and they're going to be very good for funnel damage. And Sub Rogue is one of the only specs right now that can really commit to both single target and AoE. A lot of the other specs have a little bit of difficulty evenly spreading out their damage between the two. So this is going to make them better in dungeons like Dawnbreaker or Floodgate, where you're going to see more spread out enemies. Now, in terms of their utility, rogues are all about control and their skips. So they have their Shroud of Concealment, which is great, letting your groups bypass specific pack. And with Still Shroud, it can be used even more often. We also have our Blind and Sap, which is going to be great for pre-pull control. Going to help your tank survive a little bit of that burst damage. And they also have their Kidney Shot, their Gouge, and Cheap Shot, which are some of the best single target crowd control spells in the game. So you can really shut down those priority casters. And if you pair a Sub Rogue with something like a Fury Warrior and a Havoc Demon Hunter, for example, you're going to have very tanky DPS specs and then a rogue that can kick the casters and just negate group-wide damage even more. They also have their Shiv, which is a great way to remove enrage effects. And of course, how can we mention rogue without talking about their poisons? So Numbing Poison for slowing caster attacks, Atrophic Poison for group-wide damage mitigation, or Crippling Poison for kiting. Now, in terms of their drawbacks and limitations, they do have weaker sustained AoE. So their clear potential has improved slightly this season, but it still lags behind some of the top tier AoE specs that we just talked about. They also have very high cooldown dependency, so you're very strong in your cooldown windows, weak outside of them. They also have a lot of high mechanical demand, so small mistakes or mistimed abilities can lead to big DPS loss, and they're not very tanky compared to all the other specs that we just listed, so they do have some of that limited self-sustain, and that's just another thing that adds to their difficulty. So Sub Rogue is going to be strong for their high burst damage, excellent single target performance, high mobility and control, their unique toolkit, and of course their high skill ceiling that really rewards the mastery of the spec. Then the final melee DPS on our list is going to be Feral Druid. So Feral Druid has quietly carved out a solid spot in Season 3. After years of struggling to find a comfortable balance between both single target and AoE damage, recent tuning and tree redesigns have given Feral the flexibility that's always needed. while still not breaking the absolute top tier meta. It's still performing well. So historically, Feral's biggest weakness in Mythic Plus is its inability to perform well in both AoE and single target, and their Season 3 rework minimizes this issue, and Feral now requires fewer talent points to reach its core AoE tool. This means that Feral can now adapt to the dungeon's needs, opting for strong cleave builds or strong single target builds. Another area where Feral really shines is in its cooldown distribution. Rather than relying on 1 or 2 really long high impact cooldowns, Feral is going to enjoy frequent and varied damage windows, which gives them excellent pacing, allowing you to better easily align your burst window. So having all these multiple smaller cooldowns makes you less prone to downtime, and this is going to give you more rhythm and consistency. Now, we also have really good utility and group support. So of course we have that Mark of the Wild, that 3% versatility buff. We have our Nature's Vigil, converts our damage into group healing, our Soothe for Enrage effect, Typhoon and Incap Roar, the soft crowd controls, and Ursol's Vortex, which is great for grouping mobs together. In terms of our survivability and self-sustain, but only in the hands of players who actually make use of their full defensive toolkit. So that's going to be Bark Skin, which is going to be moderate mitigation, Survival Instinct, which is going to be your major damage reduction, and then of course our Bear Form, which is very often underutilized, and you can time this with specific boss effects to help you soak some of that damage by increasing your health pool. So there is still a pretty big balance between skill expression and survivability. Now, another thing that Feral really has is their mobility. It's some of the best in the game between your dash, your Tiger Dash, and your Wild Charge. So this is going to give you more DPS through your constant uptime, which is something that like our Fury Warrior struggles with. And Feral also has slightly longer melee range than a lot of other melee specs. So just another way to help increase your uptime. So this blend of speed and reach is going to make Feral pretty comfortable to play in the modern dungeon design. Now, some of their limitations, there's no hard AoE stun. They also seem to be often tuned out of the meta. You know, Feral Druid is not always in the best spot. In my opinion, they're like the holy paladins of healers. Blizzard just can't seem to make their mind up with the spec. Your active defensives can be a little bit difficult to use, like your Bear Form, and you do have utility overlap with the other Druid specs, and there's 3 other Druid specs that you are competing with. So why is Feral Druid strong right now? You can safely go between AoE and single target damage builds. Your cooldowns are great for Mythic Plus pacing, very low cooldown. You're not going to be tied down to a 2 or 3 minute cooldown for your big damage windows. You're pretty good off healing and defensive tools. You have probably the best mobility kit in the game. And of course, you bring that juicy Mark of the Wild. All right, guys, that's the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking, subscribing to the channel. See you guys in the next one.